You know the joke about a millionaire stopping by a roadside mechanic? For Ibrahim Traoré, it wasn't a joke at all. But wait until you hear what he actually did. It's the kind of punchline that'll move you to tears. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So, did you click the subscribe button? Great, thank you so much. Now back to the video. It was a hot afternoon, the kind where the air feels heavy with dust and heat. The roadside mechanic shop barely stood out. A makeshift canopy of tarpaulin stretched over mismatched metal poles, tools scattered across uneven ground, and the sound of wrenches and hammers filling the air. The road nearby kicked up clouds of dirt every time a car or bike passed, coating everything, even the mechanics themselves, in a thin, gritty layer. Their hands moved with practice and precision, but the reality of their work was evident in their worn-out faces and grease-streaked overalls. Among these workers was a man doing his best to fix a broken-down truck. He seemed completely absorbed in his task, but the difficulty of his situation was impossible to miss. His shoes were scuffed, his shoulders bore the slump of exhaustion, and he worked with a kind of quiet determination that spoke more of necessity than choice. This wasn't a profession for passion, it was survival. Meanwhile, driving by on that same dusty road in a convoy of sleek vehicles was the leader of the nation himself, Ibrahim Traoré. Rising to prominence as a trailblazing figure of integrity and resilience, he had become a symbol of hope to many. His presence alone often commanded respect, with a reputation that mirrored his position: powerful, capable, and above the everyday struggles of people living hand to mouth. In that moment, these two lives couldn't have seemed more different, one defined by prestige and influence, the other by grim, grinding labor. But what the onlookers may not have realized when the convoy rolled to a quiet stop was that these two men had something rare in common: a past. Ibrahim and the mechanic had once shared a simpler time together, growing up as close friends. Their paths hadn't just diverged as they became adults, they had split entirely, one leading to the unrelenting hardships of manual labor, the other to the lofty heights of leadership. To truly understand the weight of this meeting, we must step into the shoes of the mechanic. His life revolved around work from dawn to dusk, spending countless hours hunched over broken engines and tangled machinery. The strain on his body had accumulated over the years, with hands roughened by tools and scars from small accidents that came with the job. For someone like him, every day brought uncertainty: whether the next customer would pay enough to cover a meal, whether his limited earnings could stretch to send a child to school, or whether the grinding monotony would ever ease. This wasn't unusual. It was the story of many in the region who worked tirelessly but couldn't break out of the cycle of poverty. According to some estimates, nearly 40% of laborers in similar regions endure grueling, low-income jobs that do little to support long-term ambitions. Education and job opportunities are often inaccessible, leaving countless individuals trapped in such circumstances. And then there was Ibrahim, wealthy, influential, and commanding respect wherever he went. For him to sit across from someone toiling to make ends meet was already a conflict of two vastly different realities. But seeing this man, someone he once shared his life with, like this, that added something personal, something painful. It wasn't just a reminder of their shared history, it was a startling glimpse of how unpredictable life can be. When Ibrahim stepped out of the car, onlookers watched carefully. What was he going to do? Would he briefly acknowledge his friend, maybe offer a small token of charity before moving on? A leader of his stature couldn't possibly have much time to linger in a place like this, right? And yet there he was, pausing, frozen for just a moment. But the gears in his mind weren't silently turning on what excuse to make or how to politely walk away. Something about the situation had struck a nerve. This wasn't going to end in a handshake or a polite exchange of pleasantries. Ibrahim looked at his friend, his expression difficult to read but unmistakably human. Then he moved closer, not simply as a leader glancing at an old acquaintance, but as someone about to do something far beyond what anyone expected. His next move was anything but ordinary. changing the course of this meeting in a way that no one on that busy, dusty road saw coming. Ibrahim Traoré stepped away from the sleek comfort of his vehicle, the stifling midday heat brushing against him. For a moment he paused, his gaze locked on the figure hunched over the engine at the roadside shop. His expression shifted, at first unreadable, then softening into a mix of disbelief and something deeper. Sadness? Maybe. Or perhaps it was recognition, mixed with a quiet surge of emotion only a shared history can stir. Around him stood his entourage, a group of well-dressed aides and security personnel who exchanged uncertain glances. This wasn't in the day's schedule. A president didn't simply wander off during a commute. As Ibrahim walked closer, the sound of his polished shoes crunching against the gravel echoed faintly. The mechanic, still engrossed in the battered car before him, didn't notice the figure approaching at first. The passers-by did, though, their murmurs rippling through the scene. A mix of whispers and open stares. Some stopped to see what would happen. It wasn't every day that a leader of his stature, surrounded by a convoy of gleaming vehicles, stopped for an interaction in a place like this. The mechanic finally looked up, and for a split second, the years seemed to fall away. It was as if they were no longer Ibrahim, the president, and his friend, the mechanic, but just two young men again, standing barefoot on their village's dirt paths, laughing about things that once felt bigger than the world. But the illusion didn't last long. The grease-streaked overalls, the rough hands clutching a rusted wrench, and the clear lines of exhaustion on the mechanic's face made the contrast between their lives almost unbearable. Ibrahim, though, didn't falter. He stepped forward, each movement deliberate but calm, and the tension of the moment grew thicker. His bodyguards watched closely, unsure whether to act or stay back. They weren't just reacting to protocol, they were clearly thrown by the sheer unpredictability of the situation. This wasn't how someone in his position usually acted. For a leader, especially in this part of the world, the norm would have been to offer a casual handshake and leave behind a polite but distant gesture. Perhaps money from an aide or a vague promise of assistance down the line. But Ibrahim had no interest in conventional expectations. He stood before his old friend, his voice low as he said something that only the two of them could hear. The mechanic's face changed instantly. At first there was hesitation, his hands fidgeting with the wrench as if unsure how to respond. Then a look of relief, almost disbelief, softened his features. Around them, the onlookers couldn't hear the words, but the shift in the air was unmistakable. Instead of handing his friend a stack of money or exchanging hurried words on the surface, Ibrahim did something much more profound. He reached out and pulled the mechanic into a tight embrace. This wasn't the polished gesture of a public figure putting on a show. It was genuine, raw, and deeply human. It broke through the glossy barrier that often separates a leader from the people. At that moment, he wasn't a symbol of power, but a man reconnecting with his roots. The ripple of disbelief spread through the gathering crowd. Such a gesture, while it might seem simple, is anything but common from someone in Ibrahim's position. In many cultures, especially where rigid hierarchies frame interactions, displays like these stand out sharply. Leaders seldom stray from their constructed image of authority and distance. Even Ibrahim's closest staff appeared caught off guard. Some glanced at one another, unsure of how to frame what they were witnessing. This wasn't the only surprising move. It didn't end with a hug or whispers of encouragement. What came next was so entirely unexpected that word of it began to circulate almost immediately. Ibrahim turned back to his convoy and made a decision that would signal a shift in power dynamics you wouldn't expect to find on a dusty road. The conversation started. The questions rippled. What kind of leader does this? And how will this one moment change the lives not just of two men, but perhaps an entire community? What happened next was far bigger than anyone standing on that dusty roadside could have imagined. Ibrahim's gesture toward his old friend Thomas didn't just change one man's life, it became a catalyst for something far more meaningful. The immediate impact on Thomas was unmistakably transformative. For years he had worked tirelessly as a roadside mechanic, juggling the pressure of making ends meet with the unyielding demands of a physically taxing job. But then came Ibrahim's decision, and within days, Thomas's life took a dramatic turn. More than just offering money or temporary relief, Ibrahim intervened in a way that pulled Thomas out of his struggles altogether. He provided funding for a proper training center where Thomas could teach young mechanics and pass on the skill set he had painstakingly built over the years. It was more than charity. This was about creating opportunities, not just for Thomas, but for others in the community looking to learn a trade and improve their lives. Alongside this, Thomas was given a new home for his family, a place to live with dignity instead of the modest shack they had called home for so long. Perhaps one of the most emotional gestures was Ibrahim arranging a full scholarship for Thomas's daughter, Amina. For a father who'd worked his whole life just to get by, seeing his child offered a chance at education she could never have dreamed of was more valuable than any financial gift. The impact, however, didn't stop there. Word spread quickly through the community and beyond, with people awestruck by the sheer humanity of Ibrahim's actions. In a country where leadership often feels distant and detached, this rare display of connection turned into inspiration for many. Those who witnessed the moment or heard about it later felt a renewed sense of possibility. For the people in Thomas's neighborhood, who were no strangers to struggling for survival, this story reminded them that their contributions mattered, no matter how small their roles seemed. There is something universal about stories like this. History and psychology tell us that individual acts of kindness can ripple outward, inspiring others to reflect on their own potential to make an impact. In Thomas's case, his story became a point of conversation well beyond his community. Public recognition of his hard work and dedication planted a seed in people's minds. What if everyone could celebrate and empower those who work with honesty and humility, even in the harshest circumstances? Around this time, Ibrahim held a press conference where he spoke openly about why he had chosen to step out of his convoy that day. He emphasized the importance of honoring individuals like Thomas, who quietly contribute to the backbone of their society. True leadership, he reportedly said, is about lifting those around you, especially the ones who have dedicated their lives to honest work. It wasn't just a speech, it was a statement that set a precedent. Ibrahim's approach challenged the conventional idea that only grand political gestures mattered. In doing so, he ignited a conversation about how smaller, individual acts could collectively shape a more compassionate society. This ripple effect wasn't just emotional or symbolic, it took on practical dimensions as well. As word of Ibrahim's actions spread, initiatives began forming organically. A group of local business owners, inspired by the story, started a fund to support struggling tradespeople in the area, supplying tools and equipment to help them succeed. Schools in the region began spotlighting underprivileged students' achievements, hoping to encourage others like Amina. Even the press began telling similar stories of unsung heroes from marginalized parts of the country. Examples of such ripple effects aren't unique to this story. In many parts of the world, seemingly small acts of kindness have grown into larger movements. In studies tracking philanthropic behavior, researchers frequently note how witnessing acts of generosity can positively influence others to pay it forward, creating a domino effect of goodwill. What Ibrahim did for Thomas reflected this principle on a strikingly personal level. It wasn't about one grand solution, but about demonstrating what happens when someone with influence decides to act with empathy. And there it was. What started as a moment between two old friends had grown far beyond them, becoming a symbol of change for an entire community. This transformation wasn't just about fixing a man's challenges. It was about reminding everyone that even the smallest gesture, made with sincerity, has the power to multiply. Ibrahim's decision became proof that real leadership isn't defined by grandstanding, but by the willingness to see dignity in every individual's story. Ibrahim Traoré's story stands out because it reveals something deeper about leadership. In reconnecting with Thomas, his old friend, and now a struggling roadside mechanic, he broke away from distant displays of power. Instead, he showed that leadership thrives in moments of empathy and personal connection. His decision to listen, to act, and to change a life rippled outward, reminding us how dignity and respect can transform communities. If each of us extended a hand to someone in need, how far could that kindness spread? One small step, just like Ibrahim's, might spark change where it's least expected.